Number 30. All right, so one of the SAT's favorite concepts that shows up on every test is the difference of squares. And here I put two perfect squares that you can see real plainly, real clearly, real easily. If ever you see the difference of squares, they expect you immediately to convert to the conjugate form. The conjugate form will be the square root of this one. I don't care if you put plus or minus first, it doesn't matter, but we'll put plus the square root of that one. And then the same two values only with a minus. We know this. This is like every test, we need to be looking for it. You're gonna face it. But to add a layer of difficulty, I've noticed the SAT trying to be clever, and they're going and they're putting like x squared minus 10, which is not a perfect square. What you gonna do with that when I put conjugates here?
Just the square root of 10.
Yeah, and then students don't even think to go to the conjugate form necessarily, which you normally wouldn't. Normally I would just add 10 to the other side and square root it, but if they force you to conjugates, as you said, it's still the square root of that value. It's still the square root of that value. It's just not a pretty number is all. And that's exactly what's happening in 30. How many of you picked A for number 30? Because this is what we're used to, right? They're playing on that. They're playing on that and they trapped you because that's the natural go-to, but it's going to be the square root of A. It's not even like I'm doing math here, really. It's just recognition and catching the fact. Now you know that they might try to pull this fast one on you and give you a not perfect square, but now you know what to do. Next.
36.
36? How many of you like working with concave quadrilaterals? Yeah, there's not too many people's favorites. Yeah. You know what I like? I like triangles, squares, rectangles. And circles are? So I like circles. But the catch is, to deal with this ugly looking shape, I'm going to cut that into something I do like. That's a fundamental. When they give you a shape, a trapezoid, not too used to working with those, cut it into shapes you do like. I'm going to cut this into a shape, a different shape, but I have to do it with the circle in mind. Why? Because they put it in a circle, and what do they have in common? So if I want to cut this guy into triangles, I don't want to cut it to here because that means nothing to my circle. I don't want to cut it to here because the chord on the circle doesn't really tell me much. Where do I want to cut it? What's meaningful to a circle? The diameter and the radius. I would do the radius here. Oh, look at that. What must be true about all radii?
The same.
Yeah, and so it's very easy to hide in plain sight isosceles triangles inside of a circle. And then, since we know the two sides are equal, the conclusion, their opposite angles must also be equal. So if this is 20, this is 20, if this is 20, this is 20. Now there's a whole bunch of ways that we can solve this. Those who are connected close to geometry might remember the rule of the inscribed circle, or excuse me, the inscribed angle of a circle. If you remember that, you're golden. If not, we just have a couple more steps because we know triangles, don't we? How many degrees in a triangle? 180, so how much more for this one? 40 and 140. 40 and 140. How many degrees in the circle?
360.
So that's 280 plus how much more? Use the calculator. You know, we don't get bonus points for mental math, right? We do make some errors with mental math. Use the calculator wisely. Don't use the calculator without connecting your mind either, because if you use the calculator without that mental connection, you can get a ridiculous answer and not notice, right? So keep the mental connection, and go, wait a minute, I must have made a wrong input. But do use the tool to check, I use the tool to check my mental math, and I use my mental math to check my input. So, the takeaway is cut the shape into something you do like. And circles are triangles. So I'm going to use triangles. All right, let's then get back to on target with practice test 6, which is, we're going to start with the reading on page 818. And let's see, what's the first item we want to discuss?
9.
Number 9.
Oh,
6?
she had 6 before me.
We'll go to 6. So if they want to know what, let's start with number 6. They want to know what bridegroom is being used for in line 62. Where am I probably going to have to read to know what bridegroom means? Before and after, usually the best clue comes when you read through a sentence or two. But let's go look at line 62. I would probably just read the whole paragraph because that'll give me my context. But on the bicycle now, with my old legs, and with the many injuries I've received when heavy machinery fell on me, I cannot any longer bicycle about like a bridegroom from farm to farm. And he's contrasting, I can no longer bicycle like a bridegroom. Just a little bit ago, he said, because of my old legs. So we're contrasting. So sometimes the link is not a direct meaning, but rather through contrast we get the meaning. So he's using bridegroom to contrast with his age. Okay? When I first had the good fortune of entering your employment, I beg you, sir, let me go. I think then if we continue to read, we see the solution is a motorcycle. And so that's clear. He's getting too old to bicycle about. He is no longer young. Yeah. We contrasted it with his old legs. This time I think the best clue came before. Next.
9.
The passage states that the farm managers react to new obs receiving a motorcycle with what? Okay. These kinds of questions that don't give you any line references and you've got to spot it in the text, usually the answers are pretty direct. But what makes them challenging is I've got to go find it, like looking for the needle in the haystack if I don't remember. Little bit of help. Where can we find that? What lines can we find the answer to it? Because it's going to be fairly direct.
Yeah, it actually says disgusting. Yeah.
Yeah, line 74. Much to the disgust of the farmers. Again, it
I
gets
literally
frustrating.
read that too.
No,
and
literally,
I
but when
don't
we go back
understand.
and we see the answer, like, that says it directly. Yeah,
Oh, I
these
see
kinds of
it.
questions usually are pretty direct. But it's finding them. You know, going
I
back.
looked right at it too. I don't know whatever it said.
Next. Anything before 25?
12 and 13.
12 and 13. All right, this would be good to practice the tandem again. Number 12, according to the passage, what expectation do traditional authorities now face? So from anything in the passage, so that's nice, about what? What traditional authorities now face. Step 2, any other potential disqualifiers in the question?
Single traditional authority?
Sorry?
Quantity?
Quantity, singular, plural, right? Authorities, yeah.
Have you said the point of view?
We do, I always, the point of view is always in every one of them, so it's from the point of view of anything in the passage, right? About expectations that traditional authorities now face. And we have the concern of always beware of the singular plural. So don't tell me what one person is worried about, tell me what plural think about. But there should be a glaring timing. I don't think it'll necessarily have an impact, but I want you to be sensitive to and tell me, what is the glaring timing concern in the question?
No.
Now, versus last year or wherever, whenever. So it turns out I don't think that these quantity and timing clues are going to make an impact, but you should be constantly spotting them because sometimes they will. So let's go look at the evidence. What do traditional authorities now face in terms of expectations? Now, 2 to 5. Unlike personal or private knowledge, such as the health of one's friends and family, the conduct of private hobby, public knowledge. Oh, that's, yeah, we're done, all right, I read past it. There's no traditional authorities in here, are there? Or expectations? I think that's a hard strike on A. Let's go read 20 to 21. The production, circulation, and reception of public knowledge is a complex process. That may be true, but I don't see any traditional authorities in here. I don't have the right perspective yet. Throw it out. 33 to 38. As part of the general process, as part of the general process of the transformation of authority, maybe there's a reference here, maybe you better be careful, whereby there has been a reluctance to uncritically accept traditional sources of public knowledge. This sounds like I'm getting the right perspective, right? The demand has been for all authority to make explicit the frames of value which determine their decisions. That's the demand, that's the expectation. This definitely provides an answer. The challenge will be to articulate the answer using these words and then go compare. So how would we articulate the answer? It is that the traditional authorities must make explicit the frames of value which determine their decisions. Whatever that means.
They should be transparent.
I don't think they're gonna say those words exactly, but they're gonna say something that means that. Let's go look at the options. They should be uninfluenced by commercial considerations. That, I'm pretty sure that's not what it means. It's not about commercial. It's that they should make clear their values. I think values is an important word in there. You know, key in on the part of the answer that you know that makes sense to you. They should be committed to bringing about positive social change. You know, if they need to make explicit the frames of value which determine their decisions. Why do they make the decisions they make? It's not about social change. They should be respectful of the difference between public and, you need to tell me why are you making your decisions and what are your values. They should be transparent about their beliefs and assumptions. I think that's their values and their decisions. So, and when you get an answer like that that's a little confusing, notice how I latched on to values and decisions, and that's the way I was able to filter out all of the other false perspectives. This is especially important when you're reading the 1700s and 1800s language and you're like, I recognize 2 words in there. I'm gonna latch onto those 2 and I can still get the answer. Next.
25.
So 25 is not a 10 pair. Not part of a 10 pair. So this is another one of those where here's a question. It's going to be in the text somewhere. We're not telling you where. Answer's probably pretty direct. Who got number 25 correct? So can you tell me where you found your evidence for this? Because it should be fairly direct. What lines should we look at?
I don't remember.
Yeah, it's been a while yet. So why, let's go back to the question itself. What's an important timing clue in the question? Initially, at first, what seemed reasonable? Before they really got into their study, what seemed plausible? That they could attract more pollinators if they did what? And we have to find that. Those of you who got it right, let's go find it again. I think line 26, intuition suggests,
Yeah.
meaning initially, there's my timing clue. The more of the aroma should be more appealing. So if they increase their aroma, which one says that? Increase their floral scent. That's what aroma is. Remember, we said we're going to be using synonymous expressions. But I would circle the word initially in the question as a reminder to spot your timing clues.
What's the difference between increase their floral scent and emit a more very fragrant compound?
Increase the scent makes it more intense. Varied maidens may have different types of scents. So that word varied would be the disqualifier in that one.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's important to spot the difference because that one does look fairly similar. But the differentiation is not quantity, but rather variety.
Yeah. 31. Yeah.
Well, we can't do 31 without 32. Oh, we could. I don't like to. All right, so let's look on page 829, number 31. According to the passage, Thies and Adler's research offers an answer to which of the following questions? So point of view, Thies and Adler's research about an answer to what question? Now, just keeping my sense of timing, if I'm going to be able to see what their research tells me and answers, I'm probably going to find the answer after we've read the research, right? So I'm guessing the evidence is going to be later on, I'm pretty sure. So I'm literally going to start with 85 to 86 and work my way back and save a little time, not have to go through the early stage. They could switch it up on me, but I'm just trying to play the odds here. So 85 to 86. So it answers what question? The new results provide a reason. That would answer a question if you give a reason, right? Provide a reason. The Texas gourd plants never evolved to produce a stronger scent. Okay, so the research answers the question of why the gourds never produced a stronger scent. And does anything say that in number 31? How can Texas gourd plants increase the number of visits? No, it's about why not a stronger scent. Why is there an upper limit to the intensity of aroma? That's why there's not a stronger scent, isn't it? There's an upper limit. So that's what it's saying, synonymously. Now, if you went and looked at all of the other lines, none of the other lines answer any question at all. Next. Sorry?
42.
Anything before 42? 37? Okay, let's take a look at a vocab. The word observe. Let's go put it in its context. It's in line 32, right? Okay. So I would start at least at the beginning of the sentence, which starts on, line 28, but? No. No, with I mean to say no such thing. But I do mean to say that although bad laws, if they exist, should be replaced as soon as possible, still while they continue in force, for the sake of example, they should be religiously observed. And what word would I use with, in terms of, you just said a little bit ago. What do you do with laws? You follow them, you obey them. I'm thinking you obey the laws. We definitely linked back to no, I didn't. I thought they used the word obey, but that's just my connection, was you obey the law, right? So if I go and say they should be obeyed, the laws should be obeyed, then the only one that connects with that would be followed. Now scrutinized, that's probably something Thoreau would have said. think, I don't know if I have another takeaway beyond that. 37 or 42? 42, based on the passages, one commonality in the stances of Thoreau, that Lincoln and Thoreau take toward abolitionism is blank. Well, if we look at the premise in the main subject that Lincoln is talking about, is he talking about abolition? His fundamental premise is what? If laws are bad, we should work to change them, but until they're changed, we should follow them. And Thoreau says, yeah, maybe not. Maybe civil disobedience would be appropriate if the laws are that bad. So that's their fundamental point, right? That's what they're after. Abolition is not central to their argument. And it's kind of hard to pick that answer because, you know, we know a little bit about history. We know that it was very important to these two guys. But it wasn't central to their argument in these passages. They used abolition at the very end as an example of their point. But they didn't argue the point, they didn't argue about abolition. They argued about laws more broadly. So neither author embraces the cause as his own, unfortunately, is going to be the answer. Neither author embraces the cause as his own in these passages. Historically, yeah, but not here. That's one of the slight differences, guys, when you're doing a science reading versus when you're doing a historical reading. It's like, having historical reference is important, but you can't make assumptions from what you know about history because that might not be the point of this passage. Anything you know and you read your science passages, knowing the gas laws helps me understand, right? And I can absolutely use that knowledge to help me understand my Punnett square here, right? Or whatever the topic is about. That scientific knowledge can help you. Sometimes they word a question like this to hurt you with what you know about history. They don't do that a lot. They do maybe one question here or there just to burn like 80% of the students. Next question.
I got 43 right, but it's like, I spent a lot of time answering that right.
Let's go back and remind ourselves that 3 of the answers are wrong. And sometimes it's easier to just quickly throw out the obviously wrong ones. So this is in the blurb, this is written by someone named Kevin Bullis. What tech is next for the solar industry? It's being published in the MIT Technology Review. Well, we can't necessarily make assumptions too much here, but immediately, why don't I like D Hobbyist? It's not likely to get published in the MIT Review. But that said, let's go find our evidence. Who did get 43 correct? Right, so what was your evidence that told you that this is a journalist versus a consumer or scientist?
Because he knew the information, but he wasn't going into depth about
Yeah, and he was
how I
talking about
imagine
other
a scientist.
scientists, not like,
Yeah.
oh, my data.
Right,
Yeah.
when he's referring, as soon as he starts quoting other experts,
Yeah.
he's not necessarily the expert.
Yeah.
That's one thing. And another thing is, well, a consumer could do that. How do we know journalist versus consumer? Well, there's 2 parts to the answer. It's not evaluating the options, it's talking about where the, what changes are happening to the technology. It's not like, hey, you could have this for your home, or you could have that for your home, right? It's not, the second part is false.
What does enumerating mean?
Number.
To number or make a list.
Okay.
I didn't really understand the only graph. I don't know why. I was just super confused half the time.
Well, you know what, the way I look at graphs is I don't, until I see what the question is typically, because in these passages, you could sit there and stare at the graph and lose a whole lot of time, and there's about 1,000 different things you could conclude about it. But there's only one or two questions. I don't know where they're going. I always read the question first to help me understand what they're looking for, and then go and analyze my graph to look for that. In any analysis of the graphs and charts, I base on the question. Help me focus in. What else? Anything else? Okay, so those of you who will be watching at home, if you have any questions that were not answered today, make sure you're gonna have to put them in the YouTube comments, and we're going to answer them that way. Let's move on to section 2.
Number 7.
Section 2, starting page 838. The first number right here is number 7. Anything before that?
3.
3? Okay, let's start with 3. Now, you've heard me say this before, that being not a good option, right? Well, A, B, C, D all use being, so you have no choice. However, look at option A. Does it use being again?
Yes.
Then throw it out. Does that make sense?
Yes.
We're gonna have to pick an option that uses being. Fine, I don't have a problem with that. I'm just not gonna pick if there's one only that offers being. And so A uses being again, he's out. Then, I don't know, I think my eyes like D a little bit better because it looks to be a whole line shorter. So let's go check that out. I'm gonna check my more concise option first. In addition to being unsightly and odorous, these algal blooms cause oxygen depletion, which kills fish and other wildlife in the lakes. I like it. I'll pick it, because concise is better. Unless, and I ran into this working with some students yesterday, so be careful. A couple of students kept saying, well, I picked it because it was more concise. Yeah, but when you get one of these content-focused questions, like which one best connects with the examples that follow, conciseness is no longer an issue. You understand that? So the type of question, if you get a content-focused question, don't worry about conciseness. This one was just how do we join the two sentences. Conciseness will matter. But not in whenever they ask you for something specific, you've got to give them that something specific, no matter how short or long is irrelevant.
Can you actually do 4 real quick?
So we're looking for punctuation after green. Do we have a complete thought leading up to green? Because that's one of the things we're looking for, right? Independent clauses, dependent clauses.
Yeah.
Just weeks after the scientists added the nitrates and phosphates, the water in Lake 227 turned bright green. Got a complete thought, beautiful. Now, that means we can put a hard stop. We can put a period, a colon, in B, or a period again in C. So the hard stops are okay for the first part. About the second part, I don't know. Let's go take a look. And we have to be careful because they'll add words or take words out sometimes, and that changes if we have a dependent clause or independent clause after. So after, it says in option A, it was thick with, why would I stop? It was thick, yeah, I don't like A. B, it was thick with the same type of algal blooms that had plagued Lake Erie. That works. That's another complete thought after a colon. I'm allowed, right? As long as what? It's a definition or an explanation of something, which it is. So I think B is probably going to be the answer, but let's go check C. It was thick with, again, what? I'm stopping again right after my preposition. That seems, there's no reason to. And then D says the same thing as B. It was thick with the same type of algal bloom that had plagued Lake Erie. However, D is known as the dreaded comma splice. And that's, if you pick D, you missed the dreaded comma splice. You cannot splice together two independent clauses with the comma. You would need a coordinated conjunction with it, right? 5? Let's go to 5. The best transition from the previous paragraph. I've got to give them what they're asking for. What are they talking about previously? They're talking about the algal blooms on the lakes. Okay.
For this question, are they asking to put the new sentence before the one they have? Or to
No,
keep
no,
it
option A
different?
is underlined.
So you
So in
could
other words, option A would be leave the underlined sentence. Option B would be replace that with this one,
Okay,
right?
okay.
And then, of course, it has to, not only does it have to flow in, it also has to flow out. But, excuse me one second. Does A flow in okay to you? Why not? I'm not saying you're right or wrong, I'm just, why don't you like the flow in from, does it link, because we want to transition from the previous paragraph.
It's talking about a mission and threats to the environment, but the last paragraph is talking about algal blooms and like
Mhm.
lake.
Okay. The
Yeah.
scientists did this, this experiment,
And it doesn't talk about the scientists, yeah.
and then we say one mission of the experimental lakes is to conduct research that helps people better understand threats to the environment. That's what we were doing. In other words, I'm saying, I wouldn't have too big of a problem with the flow in. I don't think it's the best flow in, but I think it's at least connected to it.
The flow out. The flow out,
The
yeah.
flow out, I've got a problem with flow out here, for sure. Because then it says, the scientists divided the lake, what? Remember we talked about this, about your flow in, clues? Remember your flow in clues? And we're looking for pronouns, we're looking for transitions, you know, the 3 C's transitions. We're looking for specifically this, that, these, those, and the, right? Not just in the sentence we're looking at, but the sentence afterwards. And to me, the sentence afterwards where it says, the scientists divided the lake, well, you better tell me what lake in the previous sentence, and there's no the lake in option A. Does that make sense? So not only we're looking in the sentences for flow into the sentence, we look at the sentence after for clues about whether that sentence could be there or not. And then we go to, yeah, there's only one that gives me the lake, right? So there, that one little word kind of points to what the answer has to be. So don't just check the sentence question, check the sentence after the location to look for those same clues. So the answer should be the one that has the lake, C. Next,
7.
7. What is when you see a bunch of verb forms offered, what is the first thing you look for? And don't say tense or timing or I'll stab you in the arm. I'm sorry, I get a little bit crazy with this.
Do it.
What's the first thing you look for? Subject-verb agreement. Subject-verb agreement. First. We will worry about tense and timing after. So what is the subject? What is it that teams? Let's go find out. The experiment confirmed their suspicions when half of the lake containing the phosphates, what was teeming? The phosphates weren't teeming. That's the trap. That's their favorite. Here's a singular noun, subject, and now I've got this prepositional phrase and a bunch of other blah, 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 and I end with a plural noun with the verb, because now your brain just heard a plural noun and it wants to put a plural verb. But way back here, the subject is actually singular. They do this they do this all the time. So I've got to watch that before I worry about timing, otherwise I'll miss the boat entirely. So, what's the subject? What is it that teams? Yeah, it's not even the lake, because the lake is in a prepositional phrase, all of the lake. It's literally half of the lake, yes, but half. And if you want to apply this, guys, if you think, if the subject is plural, use the pronoun they. If the subject is singular, use the pronoun it. And check it with your verbs. Do you say they, do you say it was teeming? It was, yes. Okay. Do you say it were? No, throw that out. It are? No, throw that out. It teems? You could. Now we'll worry about the tense. Is it A or D?
A.
Yeah, we're talking about what happened. So first subject verb agreement, then after we rule out, then we many times we won't even have to worry about the timing because only one option will work. All right. Next.
10.
Got to give them exactly what they want, which is a second policy outcome. And only one answer connects with potential policy. What's a policy outcome? It's something that the legislation would do, right? Nothing else gives me public policy except for the legislation to be. The OCD, stick to what they ask for. Next.
Number 11.
Okay, we have to anticipate, there's a timing, a relevant counter-argument to what? That would be in favor, a counter-argument to being in favor of these types of experiments. So my perspective, you know, the perspective, time, and quantity, degree affect the writing just almost as much as they do the reading. And so I've got to give them something that connects with an argument against or for these types of experiments, specifically that perspective. If you don't give that, there's only one that addresses the perspective of these types of experiments. Or it's the only one that connects with these types of experiments. And you don't even have to worry about in favor or against, or the counter argument, or the argument for, or the timing. There's only one that connects with these types of experiments. Yep. And that's C. Next. 13. The 3 C's. All right, so here's a challenge on this one. You're being challenged to be really strict with your understanding of what's the relationship. And if you are, you're going to get the right answer. You won't like it, but it'll be the right answer. So, in front, Italy's Tower of Pisa has been leaning southward since the initial stages of construction 800 years ago. Great. Tower has been leaning southward since the beginning. Got it. Afterwards, what information do we get? If the tower's construction had not taken 2 centuries and involved a significant breaks due to war and civil unrest, which allowed the ground to settle into the tower, it would have collapsed. Do you read that and go, that makes no sense? If it was leaning southward, why would it collapse? Or do you say, well, that makes sense? Yeah, so let's go throw out all of our contrast transitions. What are our contrast transitions? C and D, right? Gotta throw them out. There's no contrast. It's logical. Now, what kind of a what kind of a transition is B therefore? Causation. Causal. So now you have to ask, does that southward lean from the beginning, does that cause the construction to take 2 centuries? Does that cause the breaks? Does that cause the war? Does that cause the civil unrest? Does that cause the ground to settle? You have to throw it out. Indeed, really? That's your best transition you got? That's lame.
Sounded weird.
It sounds weird and it's lame, but that's what we're left with. You've got to have that approach, and then you're going to go, well, suck, but you're what's left, right? Next,
15.
it's oddities, next question.
Yeah.
We missed the vocab.
But like, what's the difference between audit